case with the most horrific twists you never knew. Are you ready for a true crime story that will leave you with your jaw on your floor? This is the story of Cynthia Cdebaca.
He's dead.
He's dead, man.
Oh, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. Oh boy, oh boy.
You don't feel bad about it?
No.
Would you do it again?
Yes.
A 65-year-old grandmother who was sentenced to 50 years to life in prison for the murder of her son-in-law, Geoward Estaquio. But trust me, that's just the tip of the iceberg. So without any further delay, let's dive into the details of this horrific murder case. Background. Let's start from the beginning. Cynthia lived in a gated community in Fallbrook, California, with her daughter, son-in-law, and grandchildren. But things were far from perfect in their household. Geoward, Cynthia's son-in-law, had a history of mistreating his wife and kids, both physically and verbally. He even went as far as breaking his own son's electronics and throwing out the urn containing the ashes of Cynthia's late husband. The murder. She seemed like a regular grandmother, but on her 63rd birthday, she made a decision that would change her life forever. She took matters into her own hands and ended up killing her son-in-law, Geoward Estaquio. You might be wondering, why would a grandmother do such a thing? Well, according to her defense attorney, Cynthia had reached a breaking point. She had witnessed her daughter and grandchildren being mistreated by Geoward repeatedly. He physically and verbally abused her daughter, broke his son's electronics, and even threw out the urn containing the ashes of Cynthia's late husband. But was that enough to justify murder? Absolutely not. Cynthia's actions were premeditated. 3 weeks before the murder, she had taken target practice at an oceanside shooting range. On the day of the murder, she waited for Geoward to leave the house and then ambushed him as he carried laundry into the kitchen. During the 10-minute attack, Cynthia repeatedly emptied the 5-shot gun and even went to her car twice for more bullets. She shot Geoward 12 times, with evidence indicating that some of the shots were fired as he was crawling away. After the murder, Cynthia went to a local diner for breakfast and then spent nearly 2 hours at a Temecula casino. Can you imagine committing murder and then going to a casino? Detectives found her later that afternoon at a Fallbrook coffee shop before being caught. The trial. The trial was emotional, with Geoward's family describing him as a quick-witted, selfless, and generous man who loved his family. Cynthia's daughter, Laura Salinas, spoke tearfully about the tension in the family's home and how both families had suffered. But despite the abuse allegations, Deputy District Attorney Keith Watanabe argued that Geoward's behavior and Cynthia's actions were not justified. The jury ultimately found Cynthia guilty of first-degree murder in February 2014, and she was sentenced to 50 years to life in prison, meaning she will probably spend the rest of her life in custody. The judge stated that the jury's verdict was justified by the evidence in this case. The twists. But the story doesn't end there. During the trial, it was revealed that Cynthia had not acted alone. She had recruited her nephew, Aaron Cdebaca, to help her carry out the murder. Aaron had a history of drug use and was in debt to Cynthia for tens of thousands of dollars. Cynthia promised him a share of Geoward's life insurance policy if he helped her kill him. Aaron initially denied any involvement in the murder, but eventually confessed to being the getaway driver. He was sentenced to 20 years in prison. Cynthia's daughter, Laura, also pleaded guilty to being an accessory after the fact and was sentenced to 4 years in prison. Can you believe this? A grandmother, her nephew, and her daughter were all involved in a murder plot. Who would have thought that Cynthia would recruit her own nephew to help her carry out such a heinous crime? And what about her daughter's involvement? Should she have received a harsher sentence? It's a case with more layers than an onion, and is sure to leave you questioning how well you truly know your own family. This case is a tragedy for everyone involved, but justice was served in the end. It's always fascinating to hear about cases with twists and turns that leave you stunned. Who would have thought a grandmother living in a fancy gated community could commit murder? But it goes to show that you never truly know what's going on behind closed doors. The case is a reminder that even those closest to you may be capable of unthinkable actions. So, what do you think about this case? Do you think Cynthia's sentence was fair? And what about her nephew and daughter's involvement? Let us know in the comments below.